A little bit into the book, and I'm certainly going to keep your privacy very private because I know you're a private man, but I must mention Gary. I've always known you as somebody who has totally shied away from publicity with Gary, and yet you mentioned him in the book. Was this a thing that you pulled against yourself, or did you have to?
You know, the reason I always shied against it, Pete, I never wanted anyone to think that I was talking about having a disabled son in order to say, well, you might not think I'm funny, but you've got to like me because you ought to feel sorry for me. And that's the reason initially I didn't join the Spastic Society, although I'm a founder member of SOS, the Stars Organization for People with Cerebral Palsy. I never was active in it throughout Gary's early years because, again, I didn't want to be seen to be trying to seek some kind of advantage for him, either educationally or wherever he'd be housed when he wasn't with me. That was my reason for being so assiduous in not drawing attention to the fact that I had a son who was handicapped with cerebral palsy. And then I realized that I could help other people who had children similarly affected if I shared my experiences and some of the fun with them. And then, as Gary became more and more affirmative in his life as an adult, as his spirit carried him from day to day with more energy and more personality than half a dozen people put together that I could name, I became so proud of him that I wanted one day to celebrate him, but I didn't write about him until about a month. I think it was in the August of 1992, and he had been dead for about a month, and the circumstances of his death were so unexpected and so unpleasant that I didn't want to write about those. Specifically, I didn't think the reader would want to know that kind of detail, but I wanted to tell what a marvelous man he'd been. First time I ever got into bed with a real woman. She knew she was the first one I'd ever got into bed with. She knew. As soon as I tried to inflate her, she knew. What's he doing with that bicycle pump shirt? Later she came to love it, but that's another story. She acted coy. She said, be gentle. I said, don't worry about that. I just finished. But she was good. I mean, I was only about, 18, 19. She got me going again. And you know, a young man that age, my God, I wasn't bad. I performed fairly well. As soon as I'd finished, she went to the bathroom. She came out with the baby. She said, this is yours. You've got to support him. I said, I didn't know you could have a baby that fast. She said, that's how good you were. I used to go out. I wasn't a very good-looking youth. I was not. I had the pimples. I was a little stout. And I used to go out with a girl. She was not attractive. Her name was Roberta. I didn't realize how ugly she was until one day I took her for a walk in the woods and she found truffles. She went to Ireland. They made her put a bag over her head before she could kiss the Blarney Stone. This is ugly, right? What I mean by wolf ugly? Wolf ugly is when you wake up in the morning and you find you got your arm round her, and rather than wake her up, you chew your own arm off.
In the book, you use an expression, turning honest. Comics go honest. Explain that to me.
Well, Pete, when you walk on stage, if you're an actor, of course, you have a role to play. You're not playing yourself. And if they say you stank, they're criticizing your ability to act or your interpretation of the role that you went on to portray. They're not criticizing you. The audience isn't booing you. They're booing what you're doing. For the stand-up comedian, his commitment to what he offers the audience varies. I think to begin with, some performers, I was one of them, confect a persona, invent something that they think the audience will like. It's close to what they really are. It should be themselves made large, but quite frequently it is a puppet. And I know of many comedians, among them, for example, Benny Hill, who used to stand mentally in the wings, operating the figure, the puppet on stage that was supposed to be him. But it wasn't. It was an artificial version of him. He was not the Joker, he was the Joker's messenger who stood there in the spotlight and couldn't be hurt if we didn't like him. That's why I think so many young comedians, when they begin, carry a ventriloquist dummy, a set of magic tricks, a ukulele, a guitar, anything that says, I'm only here to play this, I'm here for this reason. If you don't laugh at me, it doesn't matter because I've got another reason to be here. I'm comparing the show. I had to come out to introduce the next act. It's nothing to do with me getting laughs or not. That's, in that way, they give themselves a self-defense until such time as they can come to terms with the fact that they are able to do their job properly. For me, it took me until I was 40 to be willing to be vulnerable in front of an audience with total honesty, to actually say, this is me, and this is what I think, and this is what I feel, and this is what I believe, and this is all coming from me. This is where I'm coming from, and this is, you've got to understand and enter this world with me, or reject me. But if you reject me, it's going to be tough on both of us, because it'll be a short act, which might be a good thing that night, but I will dry my tears quite happily if you... I will not dry tears of anguish if things don't go well. I've got used to trying to entertain it. I called that turning honest because I was really coming to terms with my own emotions, which I had kept suppressed for the first half of my life. And I think that was my training in the genteel fug of Beckenham, where my mother taught me to apply the same standards of self-control that she herself operated, which were to suppress all signs of emotion. Don't laugh out loud in public.
I'm glad you brought that up because, as you know, I absolutely worship my mother, and I know you loved your mother, but you didn't have that love and affection that you were deprived of the love and affection, as you say, from the early part of your life, and you were trained. Would you have turned out a different person if she'd had given you love, if she'd have hugged you and kissed you and been there for you that way?
I suppose so. That would have... yes, that's very difficult one because it's so hypothetical, but I imagine had there been an investment of love, had there been cuddles, and had there been laughter, and had there been I don't know if I've been born to that kind of family that really is prepared to let itself go and shout out, and like in bread, if I'd been born to bread, maybe I'd be quiet now. Maybe I wouldn't be looking for approval and attention, the kind that I've sought all my life, and maybe that wouldn't have driven me into the profession that I'm in, or into that particular side of it that I occupy, looking for laughter. I guess it might have done. On the other hand, Woody Allen put it best. He said, two babies lying on a bed, and one of them's going to grow up to be Jerry Lewis, and the other one isn't. It's in the genes. There's no way you can make the one who isn't going to grow up to be Jerry Lewis funny, or not funny on a stage. And I wanted funny from my earliest conscious moments. I think I remember most clearly being 3 or 3.5 and going to what I later found out was the splendid cinema Sydenham, South London, when our maid, in those days one had maids, she later claimed to be my governess. How pompous we go. But my mother wanted a maid, kippers and curtains. So I think she joined us when she was 14 years of age for £15 a year, all found. And she's a lovely woman, Edith. She took me to see George Formby and Boots Boots, and from that moment I didn't want to do anything else but comedy, and I just didn't grow out of that. And I always, wherever I heard laughter, that's where I went.
Do you think you would have turned out different if you hadn't come from money?
Well, so many comedians seem to come from penury. It's the haves and have-nots that creates a certain amount of laughter, and so many comedians have come from the have-nots, from poverty or from deprived situations of some kind, from the ghettos. And if you listen to the ethnic background of the great Jewish or the great black comedians, they use that. In fact, you wonder what on earth the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant comedian can talk about, since he has nothing to object to about his treatment. But I don't think it ever crossed my mind that we were either well off or not well off. As a child, I don't think it occurs to you when you're little. You don't worry about money very much, worry about your pocket money. That's the only money that crosses your mind. And then as you grow up, I suppose you're looking to make your own. I don't think my father being well off ever actually played a part in my thinking. Got my scrapbook out yesterday. Bob's scrapbook. Going back over the years. Lived a long time. When I was 17, it was a very good year. It was a very good year for small-town girls and soft summer nights. We'd hide from the lights on the village green. When I was 17. Lies. Never had any girls when I was 17. Just pimply little fat fart I was. Stuck in my bedroom all alone. I thought I'd locked the door. My mother burst into my bedroom. I was doing something, ladies and gentlemen, that every adolescent boy does, but I shouldn't have been doing it. And my mother said, "Robert, you'll go blind if you do that." Because, you see, I was trying to poke my eyes out with a stick. Over the porno awards. Do you ever watch porno movies? Have you ever seen a porno movie? You see, with a porno movie, what annoys me is the plot's never any good. You know, at the end of a porno movie, when you finish watching it, you never say to yourself, "That's a clever twist." Well, maybe you do, but not about the plot. I saw a porno movie the other day that really raised my eyebrows. But that's old age for you. My wife's approved, she doesn't approve. She said, if ever I caught you watching a hardcore porno film, I'd kill myself. I thought, wait, hold on, Bob. This is too easy. I think dogs are more responsible towards women. They're female. Female dogs are treated better by male dogs than men treat women. Because a man, if they made a little conquest, you know, they'll boast about it. They'll be down the pub telling the lads. You know that, ladies? But you'd never find a dog down on the corner saying, "Rex, Rover, come here. See that hot bitch over there? I had her last night. I'm not kidding. 12 tits. 12 tits. I had a Rottweiler once. Well, I say a Rottweiler. It was half Rottweiler and half sheepdog. It used to herd things together and kill them. And I miss Fluffy. But my brother has a pit bull. They're terrifying. Pit bull terriers are terrifying. And when they bite people, what do? They take them to the vet and castrate them. Excuse me, that's the wrong end. Pull their teeth out. If you take their bollocks off, you've nowhere to kick them.
The Pete Price Phone In.
Where you can see it, I got a big glass jar. Try this. I put it on the mantelpiece, and all the money that I saved by not buying cigarettes, I put in the glass jar. And I felt proud to see it build up. And then at the end of the month, I would take that money into town and buy cocaine. What do you think? We should have more non-smoking zones, maybe. That would be good. The French, in France, you're not allowed to smoke in public areas. Gosh, I hope this doesn't make the French people hostile and irritable. People, yeah.
The book is a bestseller, which I didn't expect it not to be. Letters figure very heavily in your life. Corporal Monkhouse and the letter to Radio Chimes. You use letters a lot in your life to have helped your career.
You're quite right. I hadn't thought of that. That particular letter, of course, was a rascally move. I was jumping the queue, which was about 12 or 18 months long, to get an audition to get onto radio, because in 1946, 47, there was a tremendous queue for attention to get onto radio. It was so important. I know it's right here and now where we're sitting is very important, but there was not, what I meant was, of course, that television was unimportant. Getting on TV was, anyone could get on TV. They were desperate to get you because they only had 5 viewers. And good professionals didn't want to give their material away for poxy little fees. They were paying like 2 guineas. Remember 2 guineas?
Changed now, hasn't it?
£2, 2 shillings. Yes, it has changed a bit now, the other way around. That's the price in radio now, isn't it, Peter? I mean, being in radio for money is like joining a monastery to meet girls. But in those days, it wasn't the money, of course. It was the instant fame that radio, national fame at once, if you did well on radio, overnight. Quite astonishing. So I was a corporal in the RAF, and I was working as a secretary to a group captain, Tompkins, who was a neuropsychiatrist at the Central Medical Establishment of the RAF just off Oxford Street, London. And after he grew to trust my letter typing, He used to just sign the letters in the morning before he went in to do the assessments of the various patients who were looking for pensions. And so I slipped a letter in among all the other ones he was going to sign and held my breath. And he signed it, and the letter was addressed to the BBC, and it said, on behalf of the RAF for making this application, that you grant some kind of audition for Corporal Monkhouse RA before we can't even begin his psychotherapy until we remove this block from his need to test himself on radio. And in view of all the wonderful work that our boys in blue have done with us in World War II, we feel sure that that kind of... It worked a treat. I kept my eye on all the mail coming into the mailroom so I could intercept the letter coming back from the BBC. But the BBC, reading about a boy in blue who desperately needed an audition, with a chance to do something for the only recently ceased war effort, immediately sent round a letter by hand. So I walked into the office. I can still see him standing there, great tall man, grey hair, piercing eyes, holding the letter, saying, "What's this?" Oh, God. I went cold. My stomach doubled up like a fist. Well, I said, "You better do it. Go on, I'm not going to stand in the way of a budding George Roby, if that's what you think you are." I said, "Thank you very much, sir." So I got away with it, and I went to that audition with two pals, which I wasn't supposed to do. One was Stan Tracy, the great pianist who has his own jazz orchestras and has written wonderful compositions since then, and a pal of mine whose professional name was Gary Miller, who was a big singing star on records in the 50s and early 60s and who died very early. Took him along with me, and just by sheer luck, the man who gave auditions and had done for these 25 years for the BBC, and who gave niggardly marks, like if you were sensational you got 10 out of 100, had his first day off sick ever and was replaced by Dennis Main Wilson, who'd just come over from Germany. Dennis Main Wilson, who was later to receive enormous accolades and fame for being the producer of The Goon Show and Hancock's Half Hour and Steptoe and Son, and you name it. He discovered Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry and Alias Smith and Jones. He's an amazing man. But at this time, he was completely off his head. He was having a nervous breakdown, and there was a whiff of marsh hair about him, and he went upstairs to listen on headphones, as our dear friend the engineer is doing right now. And we were downstairs talking into a microphone the size of a bread box. And Gary sang, and we heard him say over the talk back, "Oh, terrific, 100%. We thought, ooh, we didn't know. And then I did my routine, about 10 minutes, and he apparently wrote down 101% wow, an exclamation mark. And then he passed out. We didn't know he'd passed out. Now Stan played Gershwin medley or something. And he collapsed. But he had filled in that much of the form. And bureaucracy is bureaucracy all over the world. That form was duplicated, went onto the desk of every producer in light entertainment. Within a week, while Dennis was off somewhere at a funny farm recuperating, Gary and I, were being booked for every single radio program there was, and there were loads of them. We were the biggest new stars to burst upon the scene. We were the Michael Jackson and Madonna of our time. So I was very lucky.
Mentioning letters, I'm now going to publicly say, without mentioning any names, exactly what you did for me once, because I rang you up tearing my hair out, saying that I couldn't get into the office of a major gentleman in a major TV outfit. You wrote me a letter and said, "Send that off," and I wrote it in my own hand, and I got in the office and walked in, and the man said to me, "You do realise that the only reason you're in here is because of this letter. You are quite incredible at writing letters." And I've never told that public, and I still will not say who the man was, but I thank you again, and I publicly thank you.
It's a pleasure. The man is mentioned extensively in my book,
your
as
book,
you must
yes.
have noticed.
They now have to guess which one it is.
But I knew what would work on him.
Yeah.
I knew that saying, by putting you on television, which after all he had done, and there was them ignoring you for reasons of his own, but putting you on television, he had created a Frankenstein's monster, and now he wasn't feeding you electricity anymore. I knew he'd think, "Oh, I've given birth to, I've created something, I must keep it sustained."
Are you angry over the years, and are you angry now looking back, and are you angry at what's happening now with television, that the way talent is held back and the power is in one hand of one man?
You know me very well, Pete. You know I can't sustain anger. I'm not an angry man. And I'm not a violent man. I haven't got those qualities in me. I sometimes wish I had. They would have been, I suppose, useful at times. I am sad, terribly sad. I think that show business in Britain is on a terrible slippery slope, the worst I've ever seen in all the years that I've been working in it. And I know it's gone through some tough times before, but this is so tough, and there's so much talent being overlooked, and it's withering. It can't sustain itself. But this is not only because I think television is in absurd hands and is turning into American television. That'll be the worst thing that happens to us is if that happens. The current situation with the ITV network, everyone's aware of the fact that the programs haven't got the quality, particularly the comedy shows, that they used to have, and the BBC is not producing. I mean, it may be the one foot in the grave as the last wonderful thing that ever happens at BBC sitcoms. I hope it isn't. I hope I'm wrong. But I can't help feeling that, like as you do, I suspect, and as a great many of our listeners may, that things aren't as good as they should be. There's an awful lot of talent being overlooked and underused. Can I ask you something? Do you think we want a channel tunnel? No. Universal, no. Right across the entire room here at the lakeside. No. But we've got it. Who's it for? For the bloody French, isn't it? So if Germany declares war again, they can be in London with their hands up that much quicker. You know, people are suing the tobacco companies for lung infection. Do you know about this? People with emphysema are suing the tobacco companies as successfully. They're making money. They're making money. I said to my wife, for God's sake, sue Cadbury's for your thighs. The women I feel sorry for, I feel really sorry for you girls who are trying to give it up. So you switch to low tar, low nicotine cigarettes. Oh, come on, that's pathetic. Just because some man has persuaded you it's worth sucking twice as hard to get half as much. Do something else to relax instead of smoke. Get a pet. You know, if you stroke an animal, slows down your heartbeat, you live longer, you relax. I have a pussycat called Sydney, and I stroke my pussycat, and I love my pussycat. They're expensive. Cats are expensive because, no, not just cat food. Cat food is not expensive, but veterinary fees are expensive. My vet told me my cat needed cat x-rays. Have you ever run into this? Do you know how much they are? £35. I mean, I love the cat, but I'm not paying £35 for bloody cat x-rays. I'm sorry, I'm not. Put him in a hold all, took him to Heathrow, shoved him through security. There he was.
The Pete Price Phone-In. The Pete Price Phone-In. Call Pete now.
In all the years I've known you, you never ever spoke about your father, and I read in the book the letter that you wrote to him. Tell us about your father a little bit.
It was strange to write the letter because there I was writing it in 1993. It's one of the last things I wrote, although it comes early in the book. And he died in 1957. Bit late. Doubt whether he'll get it. I just had to put in order my process of thought about my father, which was disordered. And I thought, maybe in a letter I can get it over. And that's the reason I chose that. So I could say to him, what was it about, Dad? I remember this, I remember that, I remember this, I remember that. Now, does that put anything together that's a portrait that I can recognize? But in the end, I leave it to the reader to come to a conclusion as to what the relationship really was and who he really was, from what little I'm able to set down. Someone told me that they found that part of the book very moving, and I asked them why, and they said because they'd always wondered who their own father was, even though they had known him. They'd known his name, he'd been in the house, and eventually he died. And this particular person, who you know, said, I never really understood him or knew him, and when I read that you shared that blindness and how much you regretted it, I wept. It's strange, I think, when someone tells you the truth about themselves in a book, a process of selection goes on where you find parallels within your own life, and different people have been affected by different parts of the book, I found.
Your love for Diana, you cared for her as a friend as well. The description was so intimate. Did you have a battle within yourself over how intimate you went?
No, I tell you, that wasn't difficult for me, and I'll tell you why. Diana had already written about, she's written two books, about autobiography and the A to Z of Diana Laws, and in both of them she mentioned the fact that we had had a sexual affair. And in neither of them did she say how brief it was. She seemed to imply that it was one of the lengthier and more important affairs of her life. And it was one afternoon. It was 5 hours on a wet afternoon. But 5 hours that obviously she never forgot. And I certainly could never forget. The great thing about Diana is I only have to think of her, and Jackie feels the same. And there she is. There she is. Complete. I can see the colours, I can see the textures, I can see everything, what I can see what she was wearing, I can see that jewellery with which she would stun a buffalo, I can see all those things. She was just one of those people who burst with life. And I knew, I wrote that to make her laugh. I wrote
Hello, the Pete Price phone in. The Pete Price phone in. Magic 1548.
If you had your time over again, would you change anything?
Oh, do you know, that's one of my go-to-sleep things. If I'm lying in bed and sleep doesn't come as swiftly as I wish it would, that's one of my, I was going to say daydreams, but it's one of my night dreams. No, it's not one of my night dreams, it's one of the things I use to get to sleep, is go back over. Yes, there are things that I would change. Oh, yes, there are things that I would change. If I could go back by some kind of Back to the Future time machine, like Michael J. Fox, I would give my mother so much more affection. I would force it on her. I'd force feed her on affection until she couldn't withstand it. And I don't care how much she would turn away or say, don't do that. She'd get it. If I could do that, I feel I could break down some barriers I should have worked harder to break down. I should have been more understanding. I should have been more tolerant. I would certainly not have felt that I needed to rush from her influence into marriage, which is what I thought I had to do. I wasn't made that way. I wasn't born to be a fellow who got married early and raised a family. I ought to have given myself time to learn about life, about people, about myself, most of all, and maybe married at middle age, around about 40, the time that in fact, I found Jackie. I do want to be monogamous, and I have been completely faithful to Jackie ever since we married. But I was sexually led for the first half of my adult life in a search for, I think, the kind of love that I had lost when I was a little boy when my grandfather died. I was looking for someone to whom I could be totally devoted, to whom I would be totally 100% loyal. And I was chasing butterflies, of course.
Another question that she asked, which, as you mentioned, Jackie, was when were you aware of Jackie more than just a loyal employee?
Well, she came to work in the office for me and Dennis Goodwin when I think she was about, I'm certain she was 18. 1936. No, she must have been 20. She was born in 1936, and she came to us in 1958 or 57. Anyway, she's at the end of her teens. Good-looking, very, very slender girl. A pretty friend of the previous secretary we'd had, who had married Dennis Goodwin. So she said, to take my place, my school friend Jackie can come in. And I thought, well, she was a lovely girl, but she looked at me and thought, well, he's a married man. I used to smoke a pipe in those days and wear a tweed jacket. And I'm 8 years older than her. I was 28, 27, 28, and I've got 3 children already. And I'm very settled. And so there was never anything between us in the office. It may be the kind of silly flirtation or some light-hearted remark that takes place in an office, but doesn't mean anything at all. There's no subtext whatsoever that I can remember. Although Jackie sometimes says, well, I wonder whether I was always pleased when I knew you were coming in and a bit sad when you left. So maybe there was something, nothing much. And it was only after my marriage to my first wife broke up in 1966 and Jackie's romance with a much older man broke up at that same time, that she came round with some work. I was doing a series called Mad Movies. She came round to the house in St. John's Wood where I was all on my own because my wife and children had gone. And I said, we'll stay and have something up. We'll do a fry-up or something and we can continue the work into the evening. And then I said, do you want to stay? I was going to watch a movie, and I put on a movie on the projector, 16mm, and she stayed. And And then I sort of kissed her goodnight, which I'd never done. I mean, on the lips, I kissed her. The first time I'd ever kissed her on the lips. I dare say I'd often given her a social peck on the cheek. And I thought that was nice, and she must have thought that wasn't bad. So we did it again, and then we did it again. And then we woke up in the morning, sort of attached.
The rest was history.
Often when I'm abroad, you know, and I meet people who've never been in Britain and never seen me, they say, what do you do for a living? I say, I'm a comedian. And, you know, if you say that, people always respond in the same way. You're a comedian? Tell me a joke. They don't do this to anybody else in any other walk of life. They don't say, you're a cartographer, draw me a map. They don't do that. They don't say, oh, you're a politician, tell me a lie. You're a gynecologist, take a look at the wife. They don't do that. This is, as you know, a question and answer session, and I'm going to ask you for questions. I should warn you, however, that I have a secret weapon. Don't make me use it. Is there anyone who has a question for me that they would like me to answer? And I see immediately my old chum Jeremy Beadle is waving at me. You are the king of TV surprises. So, have you got a question?
Well, I have, Bob, but I don't really want to ask it.
You don't want to ask it. Why is that?
Well, it's not my question. It was given to me by one of your researchers.
It was given to you. What is the question?
I was told to ask you, which is better, comedy or sex?
That's a good question.
Yeah, but it's not mine.
No, it's not your question. Well, then don't you ask it if you don't want to, Jeremy. No one has... No one has the right to force you to ask questions that you did not originate. Have you got an original question for me?
Thanks, Bob. Well, actually, can I?
Yes, please do.
Well, looking around me and seeing all these famous people in the audience, is there anybody here you wish wasn't here?
By a curious coincidence. Jeremy, you know, I'm thrilled and delighted to see everybody. The one or two people who couldn't make it tonight, we had word from the BBC that Martin Lewis can't be with us tonight. Now, that's the kind of good news we need more of on TV. Dr. Hilary Jones, whom I much admire. I do. I went to him to seek his advice on how to rekindle my wife's enthusiasm in the bedroom. And he said, have you tried chewing on her left ear while tickling her stomach with a feather? And I said, my wife would hate that. And he said, wrong.
Reading the book, as you know, I'm not a great reader, but I couldn't put it down. Whether it's because I know you or not is another thing, but you know that you're my hero anyway as a comic. You did a one-man play, which I didn't know about, and you won.
And some other scripts have been sent round to Peter Pritchard, our agent at one time. He's still mine, and you fired him, but I kept him on. And
I wouldn't have put it quite like that.
Neither would he. And so he's got a few dramatic scripts for me to look at, and I do hope there'll be more drama opportunities. But that particular one, which is called The Flip Side, it was written as a radio play in Canada. A guy's alone. A very lonely radio station. He's holding the fort alone, playing records. And every time he puts a record on, he gets on the phone. His wife's leaving him, and he's begging her not to go. And through his end of the conversation, you gathered the whole background of the marriage, and you gathered that he was a real creep. But it came out slowly because he was the sweet guy on the air, like you, and in private he was a creep again, like you. So we had this extraordinary parallel with your life. I'm glad you're smiling.
A few questions left before we terminate this interview.
No, I want to tell you just the last thing is, that play, a copy of it was filmed, without my knowing it, because it's just a live transmission, it was filmed. That film was part of a number of films sent out to Angola to teach people how to make television productions. It was then returned to the BBC for destruction. The guy who was carrying it down to the furnace thought, I'd like to keep that. He kept it. We dissolved to, God knows how many years later, and he's riding on a bus next to Jim Smith, who's the floor manager for Beat the Clock. And he says, "What do you do?" And Jim says, "I'm in television." He said, "I used to work in television. I used to work down throwing all the rubbish into the furnace." "Do you know Bob Monkhouse?" He says, "Yes, he happens to be a friend of mine." "Well, what do you know? I've got a film, a play he did in 1965 in my loft." He said, "Well, do you think he'd like it?" Jim said, "I think he might. And blow me if the chap didn't come round one Sunday with it in the boot of his car and give it to me." And I gave a couple of £100 to charity, a charity he named, and gave it to the BBC, said, "Do you want this?" And they said no. And so I said, "All right, thank you very much." And I've had it put onto video so I can watch it any time.
I've got to see that.
I'll show it. The next time
you must see that. Yeah. That's, were you pleased when you saw it?
Oh, well, to tell you the truth, I was sneakily a bit pleased, but I think I caught myself acting a few times. You know, in fact, I think I've said in the book I was such a ham, the makeup girl had to glaze me.
Dennis, you have a final question?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, Bob, that you and I go back a long way.
I think you go back a little further than I do.
But down all those years, and with all your talents, there is one that has never ceased to amaze me, and that is your quite remarkable memory. Now, how far has this been put into the service of your career?
It's essential to what I do. I've always found it a tremendous asset, but it's not particularly difficult. All you need is a question, which you answer with the memory. For example, one were to try and memorize the celebrities in the audience here tonight, as I've been trying to do ever since I came out here, because I didn't know who would be here and who would not be here. And if you ask a question like, how do we get the title, An Audience with Bob Monkhouse, it's 5 words. Now, if you find 5 leading ladies in the audience who are here, and tie them into that, you can answer any kind of question. For example, the first word is Anne, which is the indefinite article, and also stands for the first name of Anne Aston, who has always been a very indefinite article. No, you always played it dumb, didn't you, Anne? Yes. And your real name is Lloyd.
Yes.
I remember that. That's the same as Kevin Lloyd from The Bill, who plays Tosh Lyons. That's your character's name, isn't it? Tosh Lyons. Yes. Perfect description in 2 words of my entire act. Tosh Lyons. We also have most of the Bill. The Bill I like to see most of is Bill Treacher, because his wife is played by Wendy Richard, who has a quirk about playing Pauline. Richard goes with Digance, and Richard Digance has just changed his homes, amen to that, which suggests amen homes, and the stars of GMTV, which stands for Give Me the Valium. And GMTV being a kind of wake-up call, and some people like to be knocked up and other people like to be phoned up. So if Barbara knocks, why is Linda Bellingham? Linda spelled backwards is Adnil, and if you've Adnil, then you've gotten out, and quickly doth the glory of the world pass away, or sic gloria transit mundi, which is on Monday. It's Latin for the phrase, on Monday, Gloria was sick in the van. Eating too much honey in the Ford. And a vintage Ford is a Zephyr, which rhymes with heifer, and a heifer is an unmarried cow. Let's see now. The only Miss Cow we have in the place is Nina Miss Cow. Nina always goes to the ball in pink. We have a Ball who was always in the pink in Michael Ball. And Michael Ball became a star in Aspects of Love, but where do you get your aspect, Michael? Well, if you bend down in a chicken run, you will get your aspect. No offense, no offense. Offense is something that goes around a territory, or turf. Turf becomes peat, which is cheap fuel. I know about the low peat price, because Pete Price is sitting here, who is the DJ star and comedian from Liverpool, where Doddy's Diddy Men come from. We have a Diddy man here, Diddy David Hamilton. Lady Hamilton fell in love with Nelson Mandela, did everything he could to reform the White Law. Billy Whitelaw, my first leading lady. I got my first leading lady in position. She played Mrs. Monkhouse. A Monkhouse is an Abbey. My daughter's name is Abby. She is my next leading lady. Abigail, it's short for Abigail. Take the Gale from Abbey. It is a powerful wind. The powerful wind was utilized by the aforementioned Le Petermain on stage in the exercise of his art. That's art with a capital F, you understand. And he had no pity for his audience. If you have no pity, you're ruthless. I am not ruthless tonight because I have Miss Maddock with me, who is my fourth leading lady. So, we had a quick cuddle, a QC, as we called it at the time. QC was also the letters that described Quite Contrary, was the television program upon which Katie Boyle introduced me. So you see, to anyone whose name I've missed, apologies. It's quite a list, but as I said, 5 names are vital to help me explain this title. First, Abigail gives me an A, then Anne or Aston comes in play, a Whitelaw W comes third, a B for Boyle, and then my word, 5 letters from my happy past, the M for Maddock, coming last, for their initials, thanking them. That's A-A-W-B-M, and audience with thank you. Thank you very much.